There are two kinds of people here today, two warring groups who stand on opposite sides of a battlefield. And the outcome of this conflict will determine whether our tank is full or empty. No, I mean literally, this conflict will result in a full tank or an empty tank, because these two kinds of people couldn't be more opposite in this way. The first kind of person never lets the gas gauge in your car go below half a tank. And you know who you are, so let's see it. If this is you right here, if you're going to fill up your car when you get here, I want you to raise your hand right now. At all of our campuses, even online, it's okay, just raise your hand. Be proud of it. You're prepared. You never have to jump in the car and wonder if it's going to get you where you need to go. In fact, if you're being honest, you're actually looking for a gas station when you see this, when you get here. Because truth be told, you never actually want to get to half a tank. So here, you start looking. And here, you actually start sweating a little. You turn the music down. You put both hands on the steering wheel. You get that serious look on your face. Your breathing gets a little shallow. And by the time you get here, by the time you get to a quarter of a tank, you're in full panic mode. Your heart is beating fast. It's beating so hard you can feel it. You stay in the right lane. You tell everybody in the car to be quiet. You want to be able to immediately pull into any gas station that shows up on the right. Price is no longer a factor for you, because by the time you get here, you'll pay $8 a gallon. You don't care. As far as you're concerned, this is empty. Now, that's one kind of person. And then there are those who haven't given a single thought to getting gas until you're here. In fact, when you see that you have a quarter of a tank of gas, your first thought is, I guess I'm going to have to get gas sometime in the next week or so. And the first thing you do when you get here is you push the little button so you can get a more accurate reading of how many miles you've got until you actually are empty. And if you're in this tribe, well, I want you to go ahead and raise your hand too. Raise it proudly, because we are the adventurers. For us, this is more like a challenge. The time to get gas, we think, is when the little light comes on and says low fuel. The car starts yelling at you. And when that happens, we switch to the digital indicator so that it can tell us something like, you have 8 miles to empty, which we know is a lie. And we take it as a personal challenge to see how low we can go without actually having to push our car into the gas station. Yeah, I know it sounds reckless and irresponsible, but I actually did a time calculation. And if you are one of those ones who fill up your tank every time it's half full, based on the average fuel economy and tank size and pump speed, you're going to spend 1,000 more hours of your life pumping gas than I will. All right, I didn't really do the calculation, but it does feel good to try to justify my way of living on the edge, constantly running my tank on empty. Of course, this isn't just about cars. If we think about this concept of how much is in the tank and how much should we have in the tank, and if we apply those questions to a broader application in our lives, we'll step back and we'll see that some of us insist on keeping the tank in your cars full, but many of us are running our lives on empty in lots of areas, like time, where we have no margin, and energy, where we're running on empty, and money, where we sometimes tend to ignore until the warning lights are all flashing at us. And that's what we're going to talk about today. This series is about positioning our lives so that we don't have to live under the constant stress of running out of money. And here's a disclaimer that will shock you. For the folks who are here today who are really past that point in their lives where you've finally accumulated a bank account that doesn't really run on empty, and you think to yourself, well, maybe this topic isn't for me. Trust me, it still is. This is for you too. because I've met my fair share of people who had some resources, and they're still worried about running out. It's sometimes irrational, but the feeling is the same. So regardless of where you are in terms of financial health and wealth, we can all learn how to do this better. And I know some of us want to avoid this subject, but money has immense power in our lives and in our world. We know that. It's why Jesus spoke more about money than he did about heaven and hell combined. Seriously. It's why there are over 2,000 verses in the Bible that are about money. And so we can't ignore this topic. We shouldn't want to ignore this topic because money isn't evil unless we love it. It's good as long as it serves us, not the other way around. And we'll get to that in a minute. But the first thing we have to do, if we're going to think and live well when it comes to money, is we've got to get the right perspective. And this is super important. It's the foundation of this topic. So here's what the Apostle Paul taught about money. He said, "You say, I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. You say, I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is beneficial. Don't be concerned for your own good, but for the good of others. For the earth is the Lord's and everything in it." So here Paul is talking directly about the person who says, hey, look, this might be you. Hey, I'm glad to come to church, and I'm glad for you to talk about Jesus. And I'm glad for you to talk about how to make my life better. So come on, Brian, I want you to talk about grace, and I want you to talk about forgiveness, and teach us what the Bible says about sin, well, at least just a little, and talk about love a lot, and teach us how to, have respect and prayer. You can even talk about that I ought to come to church more, but don't talk about my money now. That's just going too far. The Apostle Paul, he met you. You say, well, look, I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything's good for you. You might say, I'm allowed to do anything, maybe, but that doesn't mean it's beneficial to do anything. I'm allowed to run my gas tank in my car down to nothing. I'm not breaking any laws like that, but it doesn't mean it's a good idea. God doesn't just want you to live within the rules. God doesn't really want you to live with rules at all. What he wants you to live with is him. And if you do that, your entire perspective will change. And so will the way you live, especially including the way you deal with and the way you think about money. Which is why Paul finishes this by saying, for the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. And right here, the reason, if you ever look this up in your own Bible, you'll see that this section right here is in quotes. He's quoting the 24th Psalm. Let me give it to you. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. So if we're going to live with margin, and if our finances are going to be right, and if our finances are going to be a part of what makes life good, instead of a constant source of stress and anxiety, well, for that to happen, we have to change the way we think about ownership. Because the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. So this is the foundational truth that we have to have if we're going to build our financial house in a healthy way. Here it is. God owns it all. God owns it all. Wherever you are right now, I want you to say this out loud with me. God owns it all. This attitude reminded me of something that happened in the life of an American legend, a guy named Sam Houston. You might have heard of him. He was the kind of guy who, he didn't sit still well. He moved to Tennessee. He started in Virginia, by the way. He became a congressman in Tennessee, and then he became the governor, and he finally made his way to Texas, where at the time it was a Mexican territory. It wasn't one of the states. And so he was the commander in the Texas Army, and then he was elected the president of the Republic of Texas he was the first one. And then he became a U.S. senator after Texas became a state, and then he was the sixth governor of the state. The guy had an amazing career, but he wasn't just this slick, polished, refined politician like we sometimes see in our day. In fact, he was sort of the poster child for the Wild West. He was well known for fighting, not the kind we see today in politics. I mean, like beating people up and gambling and cussing and killing. And most especially, he really liked to drink. In fact, his nickname was Big Drunk. And so it was a label he proudly wore. And while he claimed he believed in Jesus, I think it's fair to say his lifestyle didn't always indicate that he was following Jesus. And then at the age of 61, Sam Houston looked at his life with all the spectacular things he had accomplished and with the lifestyle he'd been living, and he decided that there was something missing from all of it. He gave God another look, and then he turned his life completely towards Jesus Christ in an amazing turn. On November 19th, 1854, hundreds of people came from all around to personally witness Sam Houston get baptized in Brushy Creek. And what was particularly interesting to me was this exchange that happened with his pastor while in the water. Dr. Burleson said to Sam, "General, I suggest that you take off your watch. You'll ruin it if you get it wet." "Thank you," Sam Houston replied. He said, I don't want to do that. And he handed his watch to his friend. And then his pastor said, "And General, you might be better off to hand me your wallet too." "No, I don't think so, Pastor," Sam Houston replied. "I'm afraid my wallet needs baptizing too," he said. From that day on, Sam Houston's wet wallet, his baptized billfold, became one of the defining symbols of his new life. The way that he approached his money, his things, what he had accumulated, it was completely transformed. Sam Houston knew almost 2 centuries ago what many of us still haven't figured out today, that followers of Jesus follow him with their finances. Followers of Jesus, if you claim that to be you, we actually follow Jesus with our finances. And that's why Jesus would teach so much about money, including these words, when he said, if you can't even handle something small, a small thing like money, who's going to trust you with spiritual riches that really matter? If you don't manage well somebody else's assets that are entrusted to you, who's going to give over to you important spiritual and personal relationships to manage? Imagine you're a servant and you have 2 masters giving you orders. What are you going to do when they have conflicting demands? You can't serve both. You'll either hate the first one and love the second, or you'll faithfully serve the first and despise the second. One master is God, Jesus said. The other is money, and you can't serve them both. Some of us are trying to do this, though, to serve God and to serve money, as if they're completely separate, God over here and money over there, and you in the middle, torn by the competing allegiance to these 2 things, and it won't work. And deep down, you kind of know it won't work. Jesus just names what our soul has been trying to tell us. You can't serve them both. You can't serve God and money. And so we have to start with perspective. You can't just jump into technique about how to better manage money without perspective. I serve God, and God owns it all. And that means that my money is not my money. It belongs to God. And once we settle that, well, now we can go back to the tank. Literally, we can go to the tank. And so I want you to imagine that your finances are like a tank. And unlike the gas tank in your car, your finance tank has some steady inflows. There's stuff is coming into the tank, and it's got some steady outflows. Stuff is moving out of the tank. So right here are your inflows. This represents your paycheck. You go to work every day. You get paid every week or every couple of weeks or every month or whatever. Money is flowing into the tank. And maybe you're retired and you have a steady income from that. So you're not necessarily going to work every day, but still, however it comes, most of us have some kind of regular income that is reasonably predictable coming into our tank. When I graduated from college, I was in commission sales. And it certainly it's not as predictable like a salaried job is, but after a while, even then I could reasonably forecast my income, including fluctuations when I knew things were going to get a little soft and other times when it would be a little higher. So unless you're retired, this inflow right here, it happens because of an important trade that you make. And this will feel like a tangent, but this is super important, so stay with me. You take the thing that is most valuable, the most valuable commodity in your life, something that's the most limited thing you've got, the thing that God gave you that is arguably the most precious thing He gave you, and you traded some of it for this inflow right here. Now, you know what it is that you traded, right? It's your time. That's what going to work is. You give your employer your time, and your employer pays you for that time, and you get inflow into your financial tank. Now, quick disclaimer, hopefully the trading of your time that you do is into something that you actually love to do. I mean, I make that trade. I love what I do, and I know many people who love what they do. You trade your time, but it's not just your time that you're giving. You're bringing your passion, and you're trading some energy and some skill and some experience. And it's not an evil, immoral trade, but it's still a trade. And it's substantial because you've only got about 120 hours a week when you're not sleeping, give or take a little. And most of us give a third to a half of those waking hours producing this inflow right here. I mean, that is not small. That's a major investment. So here it is. It's flowing into the tank. And remember now, God gave you your time. It's His time that He entrusted to you, and you traded that time in order to get this inflow right here. Your time was always God's. So the money you traded your time to get, well, that's also God's, right? I mean, God owns it all. So money is flowing in, and money is flowing out. It's flowing out to things that we have to have, right? I mean, you got to have basic necessities. I somewhat like to eat, and I prefer not to sleep outside, so I have to have a place to live, and I got to have transportation, and I got to have insurance. So there's a whole list of things that are flowing out, some of which we have to have, and some we don't have to have. We'll get to that. Now, the problem for many people is not paying attention to outflows matching inflows. So check this out. When your outflow is equal to or less than your inflow, your tank is stable. It doesn't get higher, it doesn't get lower. Money flows in, and an equal amount of money flows out, and your tank at least is in balance. Now, I'm going to come back to this, and we're going to get really practical, but just so you know, I want to remind you that this is still a spiritual conversation. This is not a financial seminar per se that you came to today. I want you to remember Jesus saying in the book of Luke that we have been entrusted with money as an asset to be employed on behalf of our master God. And Jesus said, one master is God, the other is money. They're both important, and you can't serve both of them. And the psalmist said that God owns everything. He owns it all. So if we put those together, we end up with this truth that's really revealed in the 21st proverb. It says, the wise have a generous supply of fine food and oil in their homes, but fools are wasteful, consuming every last drop. So part of good stewardship of what God has entrusted to you, part of wise living, according to the proverb, part of creating margin and lowering stress and anxiety, part of being able to weather the storm that's coming, and I don't know what the storm will be, and I don't know when the storm will come, but that's life, right? Another storm is always coming. Part of being able to do all that is not being foolish and wasteful, consuming every last drop, all that comes in, but instead by creating margin, by having an outflow that is adjusted, if we adjust the outflow so that less is going out than is coming in. That, the proverb says, is wise living. And it means that you build over time, as the proverb says, a generous supply of food and oil. Well, what's that talking about? What it's talking about is reserves. So I want to look at this for just a second. This red line here is really sophisticated. I don't mean to talk over anybody's head, and I'm not really trying to impress anybody with my vast command of the English language, but the only word that I could come up with for this line is really academic and scholarly. So I apologize in advance. This line, are you ready? Here it is. This line means that you broke, as in you are broke. If your tank is here, you have no reserve. Now, technically, if you live right here, technically, you're not in trouble yet. I mean, if you're spending everything that you bring in, it all works as long as the inflow stays the same as the outflow, right? Remember the proverb, though, fools spend every drop. So don't shoot the messenger. The Bible said that. It wasn't me that said it, but we know that it's true because we don't necessarily like the truth, but we know that it is a reality. When you live your life so that you spend everything that comes in and there's no reserve in the tank, so you're living your life on this red line, well, the proverb says that's foolish because life doesn't work like that. It's not in perfect balance all the time, and we know it. Your income could take a hit with a job loss or an accident, right? And then all of a sudden, outflow exceeds inflow, and it's starting to drain the tank. So on this side, you're working hard, you're spending, and on this side, you're spending everything that you bring in, and everything is in balance, but then your car breaks down. And just like that, you have to have a new transmission, and you spend $3,000 you weren't planning on. Oh, and then your 8-year-old who is learning to shoot a pellet gun misses the target, but hits the picture window in your house with bullseye precision. And after running on pavement every day for 20 years, you want to keep your heart in shape. That's why you're doing that. But now your knees are revolting, and the surgery from this mutiny costs you an arm and a leg. And that's why the proverb is so incredibly important. It's why the proverb is so wise. The wise have a generous supply up here. The proverb says it's oil and fine food, but what it's really talking about is reserves. It's really talking about above the line, something in the tank. But the foolish person, well, they live right here. They consume everything that flows in. And if you want to live with margin, if you want to be faithful with the inflow that God has entrusted to you, you have to allow this tank to slowly fill above the line. Now, we could have a conversation and maybe an argument about how full it should be, but the truth is, that's not the struggle where most people live. Most people struggle right here, running their financial tank like I run my car. Let's see how close we can get without running out. And that's just foolish. And we don't really need the proverb to tell us that. There's a better way. And it begins by making adjustments on the outflow side of the tank so that slowly but surely, deliberately, we begin to build the reserve above the line. And before we can talk about how to do that, I just want to say a word of caution here. Most people think that income is their problem. Most people think the way they build reserves is by increasing income. If only I had more money, Brian, I could do what you're talking about. I just need more income. I want you to think for a minute about how much money you made 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. It's a good bet that you make more money now than you did then. In fact, I want you to go back and ask your younger self, how much would be enough? And it's also a good bet that your younger you would have named what you make today. But here you are, wanting more. I get it. I'd like to have more too. But we shouldn't lie to ourselves. The truth is, let's just tell the truth, it's never really enough because I'm really gifted at adjusting this side to make sure that it keeps pace with or outpaces this side. I'm really good at that. I often joke with God and I'll say, God, I think there's been a cosmic mistake. I don't know who screwed up there, but I'm pretty sure I was supposed to be born rich and I'd be good at it. And God responds, you were, and you're not. You and I really do have enough income, that is, but we don't always manage it well. So let's just take a brief look at some of the ways that we can keep these outflows under control. Today, you can buy a car for what a modest house would have cost just a few years ago. And the way that automakers have been able to sell cars for so much more money was really genius on that part. Because now, the way they get your payment down is they let you finance that super uber expensive car for 7 or 8 or 10 years. Now, it used to be that 5 years, a 5-year note on a brand new car was the maximum that you could get, and everybody knew that 5 years was a bad idea. So now we have these massive payments flowing out for cars that are far more than we need. Now, here's one I'm guilty of. We eat out a lot. All my kids are grown now, but truth be told, we were doing this even before Joshua, our last one, moved out. And so I'll tell Susan, hey, I'm going to make dinner tonight, and I pick up Chinese. And tomorrow, Susan will say, hey, I'm going to make dinner tonight, and she'll grab Chick-fil-A. Well, that doesn't really count. I mean, that's holy. But lately, Susan and I have started pulling back on eating out. Not only is eating out not all that healthy for our bodies, but it's really not smart for our finances, at least not all that we do. It's kind of wasteful. We can live better than that. Here's another one. Recently, my friend Beth Stoddard lost her wallet. Now, it was ultimately found, and it was returned to her intact, but in the interim, she had to take steps to protect herself. I mean, she didn't know if somebody had stolen it and was using the stuff in it, and so in the process of canceling all her cards, Beth discovered something that many of us would frankly like to avoid. She realized that she had far more subscriptions than she had really ever added up. And it's easy, isn't it? Just a little at a time. Google storage, because I probably have 500,000 emails or more from the past 15 years I've had a Gmail account. And sometimes you need to look back, and they've got a great algorithm to let you do that. And besides, it's $1.99 a month. Well, for me and Susan both. Still, what's $4? Come on. And Netflix. Now, you have to have Netflix. Hello, Stranger Things and the Great British Baking Show. I don't want to miss out on all that. And a couple of days ago, I'm just going to confess here. 2 days ago, I signed up for Paramount. One word, Yellowstone. And I have to have Amazon Prime because we wouldn't want to wait more than 2 days to get our stuff. And I have to have Spotify. Yeah, you can listen to music for free, but who wants to listen to commercials? And Dollar Shave Club and Stitch Fix and HelloFresh, and you can get a monthly box subscription for beef and golf and comic books and makeup and random surprises of a box filled with just random nothingness. And there is an endless list of subscriptions we can get. And every time we think, well, it's just a few bucks. It's just a few bucks a month. Until we add it up, which they all hope we never do. Oh, I forgot about the gym. Now, I do use my gym membership, but I'm actually very grateful for those of you who join the gym and pay for it every month, but never show up. Because if you did actually come to the gym, I'd never be able to get on a machine. So please, keep making your donation. Now, really quickly, there's a way to fix your tank problem. And it's much simpler than most people think. You simply take the input, which is a monthly number. You figure out what's coming in every month. And you make sure that the outflow is less than that. It's really not complicated. Maybe only slightly less. If the inflow isn't very big, then you might have to spend most of it, but you can make adjustments. And you don't have to spend all of it. And over time, if the inflow exceeds the outflow, even if just by a little, this will slowly grow. And these adjustments that you're going to make, it's going to cost you something. And it's not always going to be fun. I get it. I've done this many times in my life. But I'm going to tell you what really is fun, is realizing that I've got some margin, that the tank really is getting reserves in it over time. And now when the car breaks down, or the cat tears up the carpet, or the heating bill is higher than we thought it was going to be because that's the world we live in today, I don't have to be anxious about that. I don't have to wonder where it's going to come from. I planned for this. I prepared for it. More than that, when I feel the tug of God to help this person standing right in front of me, or to give to this cause, or to deploy some of the tank into something that matters, I've got the margin to do it. Now, I'll be honest, I used to hate talking about this. Really, I hated talking about it with you. I hated talking about it at home. It felt icky and painful, and I knew some people wouldn't like it. And then I've come to realize over time how critical this subject is to my spiritual health and to yours. And now I see this outflow the same way that I see the challenge of driving my car. Except, while I still like to drive my car on the brink of empty, I actually enjoy driving this tank on the brink of full. Because when we're faithful with something small like money, Jesus said, God will trust us with something more significant, like the ability to truly make a difference in the world, which you and I can't do without margin. So let me finish by putting this blessing over you today. May you and I stop fighting for ownership once and for all, knowing that God owns it all, even our money. May we see our finances as a tool that God has entrusted to us to use for His purpose. May we stop the waste and fill the tank. And may we have the satisfaction of knowing that God is going to do something amazing because of our faithfulness. Amen.
Everybody's got a balance, but no one knows how much. There's no way to run the numbers, no way to count it up. And we're pouring out our fortunes in the moments, both the big and the small. Yeah, we gotta spend it all. All I have is what you gave, watching seconds turn to days. I was made for more than just to watch it fly. A few more turns around the sun, could be hundreds, could be one. Show me how to spend the treasure of my time. Show me how to spend a life. Hey, show me how to spend a life. Never seen a tombstone say I didn't work enough. Nah. Nobody ever heard a father say I held my kids too much. God, I wanna run after what really matters, so remind me when I fall how a good one spends it all. All I have is what you gave, watching seconds turn to days. I was made for more than just to watch it fly. A few more turns around the sun, could be hundreds, could be one. Show me how to spend the treasure of my time. Show me how to spend a life. Yeah, show me how to spend a life. Oh, don't let me waste it. Don't let me lose it. Don't let me steal it for myself. No, I know it's precious. I know it's priceless. I know my time is flying by. Show me how to spend a life. Oh, show me how to spend a life. Cause all I have is what you gave. Watching seconds turn to days. I was made for more than just to watch it fly. A few more turns around the sun. Could be hundreds, could be one. Tell me how to spend the treasure of my time. Show me how to spend a life. Yeah. Show me how to spend a life. Oh, show me how to spend a life. Show me how to spend a life. Show me how to spend a life.
Most of us are here today because we want to invest in our spiritual life. We want to spend our life well. We want to grow closer to God and have a faith that actually makes a difference. When we're faithful to living within our means, that honors God. When we have no margin, it takes our focus away from being able to fully serve Him. And as the holidays approach, I know I'm going to be tempted to spoil my family, my daughter, or even myself and spend a little more than I ought to. But maybe together we can pause and think about whether we're being good stewards of what God has trusted us with in this next season. My friend Beth Stoddard that Brian mentioned has written an article about how her family chose to live within margin last Christmas. You can find that on our website, as well as a follow-up video from Brian. But until next week, thank you for being with us today, and I hope you'll come back again and invite a friend.